Hello, 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 folks. It is Super Bowl Sunday if you are in the United States. Come on in, come on in. I am live. I am live. Again, as always, if you are listening to this outside of my Patreon on 11 a.m.s every Sunday morning, then you can catch the edited episodes of my show on Apple, Spotify, and my YouTube channel. All right. So, but if you want to catch the actual full taping of my show, you can do so by joining my Patreon at the free level, actually, and higher. Anyone at the free level can catch any of my live shows. All right, y'all. But it is, folks are coming in. Hello, hello. Good morning, y'all. Good morning. Good morning. It is Super Bowl Sunday, y'all. It is Super Bowl Sunday if you are in the United States. And quite frankly, I don't really give a damn who going to win. I did care a little bit when when the Bears were in some contention, the city was alive. When the Bears were playing, I was at the United Center with the Bulls because it was Pride Night with my kid and my kid's best friend and one of their moms. And then the Blackhawks were playing that night and everybody won. So we're like, hey, maybe the Bears will go to the Super Bowl, right? And somebody was saying that, when the Cubs won the World Series back in 2016, they took us on this Trump timeline. So if the Bears won the Super Bowl, maybe we get on another timeline. Now, since the Bears ain't there, I'm still like, well, I don't really know if I care, but I'm really interested in this halftime show. I'm going to talk about this later on, but this halftime show is going to be a really interesting marker, I think, collectively around our ability to dream outside of the reality we already have, outside the structures that are already around us. All right. I'm going to get more into that, but we got folks in. So let's go ahead and start. This week, y'all, we got even more movement in the sky. And if Grace is here, I know she's saying really more. Yes, more. Okay. As February brings on the energy of change by introducing us to more fire as Saturn moves into Aries. Before the Great Mother makes her way to the shore, we get the planet of love, relationships, and justice, Venus, moving into the deep waters of Pisces, where she can really show out because she loves being here. But Mercury is already in Pisces, and with Valentine's Day this Saturday, don't be surprised that the inner poet, but also the bullshitter really starts coming out. And I say that because Pluto, Mars, and Saturn, and the Sun, are still in Aquarius. So do you own your own head enough to not get swept away in the deep waters of other people's stories? Where does your faith lie and why? Love is in the air, but it's being fueled by fire just as much as water with air. So make sure you are defining and going after what you believe love is, not the facade of love the state portrays that ends up leaving us foot in the bill. This is the weekly forecast, February 8th through the 14th. Venus in Pisces with Saturn in Aries. Whose dreams are you dreaming? Welcome back, y'all, to Yapping with the Stars, the show where I talk about what it means and takes for us to become human once again in a world that is trying to convince us that this is all there is, and it's not. So let's talk with the cosmos and see what else is possible. I am your host and guide, Nicole Rouse, a storyteller and weaver who comes from a line of storytellers who weave and tell stories in many different ways. And as an anthropologist, astrologer, and artist, I work with astrology and ethnography to explore the stories of what it means for us to be human. Because right now the present is up for grabs. So who is leading the stories that will bring us into our futures? Every Sunday, we check into the chaos we call society and ask two questions. What's the cosmos showing us this week? And what are we being called to move, create, burn, build, and or reflect upon? All right, y'all. There's been a lot of shit going on as normal. Last week, I was in my feelings. The full moon was in Leo. I talked about what was going on with elders that I'm in community with. But also, the full moon in Leo was a time in which things did get loud. That's the purpose of Leo. Leo is loud. Leo is boisterous. Leo is the sun. So what became illuminated last week for you about you, yourself, and the collectives you are a part of? Because Leo and Aquarius are in this what we call sister sign dance. They reflect one another. It's really the access of God. People talk about Leo having ego, but baby, so does Aquarius. And you know what? We all need an ego, because if you don't know who you are, if you can't hold your light, if you don't know what your heart really needs and wants and desires, right? Then something or someone else is going to inhabit that vessel and take you on a goddamn ride, right? And this is why Leo and Aquarius do always need to be in this conversation, because you got to be careful about who you lead, who is leading you, because collectives can form not just for revolution, for somehow the quote unquote collective good, because if the definition of good is still defined by the way that that former leader or that structure constructed good, all you're going to do is keep reproducing the same thing over and over, just in different fonts. When you keep doing the same thing over and over in different fonts, but you don't reflect, it's like that Xerox, right? You Xerox, a Xerox, a Xerox, a Xerox, until it becomes so goddamn light that it's white. It's a white page, essentially. And I want you to think about that as we're engaging in this kind of collective action right now, and ensuring that the actions we're doing is not just a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, so that we have whitewashed what action revolution really is. All right. This is really, to me, this ongoing story that we're all being asked to engage with by the cosmos, right? Right? The macro collective does not serve the collective they consume. This also happens to be white. Exactly, Shay, right? What we're talking about here is this idea of really who does own your head. And I've been talking about this for almost a year now, y'all. When Neptune first went into Aries last year for a little bit, and then made its way back retrograde, and now Neptune is completely in Aries as of the end of January. And now we're going to get Saturn at the end of this week, meeting the deep waters, meeting the planet that is about the deep mysteries, that is the illusionary one, the planet that we're told that we don't know a lot about. And I find astrologers interesting when they talk about Neptune, because it really depends upon I think your training and your introduction to the outer planets, and the kind of evolutionary story we're being asked to tell, with those outer planets revealing themselves during the time of the colonial project, the Western expansion colonial project in particular, right? What Neptune, I believe, is trying to show us is that we do have more control over the stories that we align ourselves with collectively. So who owns the stories that are leading the collectives to then give their head up to some type of authority? And so this is what we're going to be seeing this week, because what we're going from y'all is from the feet of Pisces to the head of Aries. And we're going to have Venus, personal planets, right, making their way. Mercury just made its way into Pisces a couple of days ago, right? And I'm going to I talked about Mercury and Pisces at the end of last week. I want to pick that up this week, because I think Piscean energy gets, I think, both a bad rap, but also needs to own a bit more of its so-called dreaminess, because that is where the strategy lies, especially right now. So Mercury going into Pisces is when we get the kind of poet coming out. We get the people who have the nice words, right? Also the confusion. Why is it confusion? Because things are not quote unquote straightforward. What Mercury in Pisces shows us, right, is the power of the word, is the power of the illusion, is requiring us to take a step back and reflect and ask, does this shit make sense, instead of just reacting off of the first kind of thing that gets us moved up. So then Venus moves over here, right? Venus is in Pisces starting this week as well. Venus makes her way into Pisces. I'm looking at my notes over here, y'all. Venus makes his way into Pisces, I believe on Tuesday. Yes, Tuesday moves into Pisces, right? Mercury is here, and so is the North Node. Now, the nodes of the moon are calculation points, and I talked about them before in the past, but I'll just do a refresher. The nodes, depending upon the tradition you engage with astrology in, they kind of mean different things. So for the ancients, they were malefic points. They were points of contention, points that you were always striving from. The South Node was going to be that horseshoe, that horseshoe shape object on your astrology chart, y'all, the one that's kind of holding up. What that's going to show is where you come into this life with, where you are kind of groomed into, what you know to be kind of the same. And then the North Node is where you're trying to go out of, where you're trying to move into, excuse me. So it's the tail of the dragon meets the head of the dragon. And there are points of no satiation. They're just points of consumption. in the modern astrology, the evolutionary astrologers in particular say, well, no, actually, those are points of destiny, right, or fate. And they get interchanged, but those two things are actually different, say fate and destiny. And what we're trying to do is, some people say you leave the south node, and so because that's what you are holding on to move into the north node, because that's what your destiny, again, or fate, depending upon how you understand these concepts, lies. I want us to pull a step back and ask us, does it make any sense? For me, it's a both and. We're trying to bring those things together. In the chart, when I look at the nodes, I see the nodes as places in which you have made a contract, right? If you think about them as the contract. Now, Jill Spillers is an astrologer, also an evolutionary astrologer, also talks about nodes in terms of contracts as well, soul contracts. But for me, it is a contract that you came in this life to try to figure out how to engage with. So when I want you to look at your charts, look at where those nodes are, and those houses that access, and also the signs. All right. Now, why am I saying all of that? Collectively, we are in the nodal transits of Virgo, South Node, Pisces, North Node. Right now, we're trying to figure out where our faith lies. Right? It's been an ongoing conversation. In order to figure out where our faith lies, we've had to let go of a lot of constructs and concepts and criticisms, right, that have left us in detriment, in particular our health. Virgo is health. Virgo is the body. Virgo is also the earth feminine sign of Mercury. Mercury is now in its opposite sign of Pisces. It's in a sign that it doesn't really like to be in. Why? Because it's going to require you to really believe yourself. It's opposite the sign that it loves to be in, not just in domicile, but in exaltation. And Virgo is the stomach. So do you believe yourself? Do you trust yourself? Do you know what your stomach is saying to you? Because you're going to get some sweet nothing said to you. You're going to get some sweet things talked to you. Why? Because the state is still trying to woo us, but it only woos through violence. So there is a way that when we get fed these stories by structures that are trying to confine us around Venetian things, and Venus is relationships, Venus is love, Venus is justice, Venus is money. Right? We're going to see some funny things happening with our money. It's already been here because Uranus is still in Taurus and it's gone direct. I don't know if y'all felt it last week, but my house got rocked a bit was minute that Uranus went direct in Taurus, because it is shaking up the last of the things that we are holding on to that we think are our safety and security and stability. So I want you to now look at where your Taurus house is and ask yourself, okay, in that Taurus house, what has been shaken up that I thought was solid? So for Scorpio risings, our seventh house of one-on-one relationships, right? What are the contracts in your life that you have had to realize need to be rethought? Because the seventh house, the house of change, the planet of change went through the house of change, activating your relationship to change. My Libras, it's your eighth house, Libra risings, eighth house of who you share resources with. Right? These are the one-on-one contracts of your life that you give up something to be with. And so it's not just romantic. This is business contracts. It's any contracts in which you have to basically marry yourself to. So inheritance and debt. Where do you have to then die in that construct, so that you can understand what it means to truly be in a relationship, in a contract, that if you do have to give parts of yourself up to, it is a part that allows you to fully be embodied in that so-called balance that you want. All right. So right now we're having these conversations with the universe, and the universe is really asking us, the cosmos is really asking us to figure out where our feet are, what we're grounded in order to figure out where our head lies. So this is a time of change. And if it feels discombobulating, if you feel like every goddamn day something else is happening and you don't know where your feet are, or you feel as if you got a direction going, and the next thing you know, that blows up and now you got to pivot. Yes. Welcome to the air of fire and air. Welcome to the elements. Welcome to the change. Welcome to the times. Welcome to the year in which we are being activated. There is no more having to sit and constantly ruminate, constantly feel it. Now you have to feel, and that feeling has to sit next to you so that you work with it. Because what they're going to keep doing is giving us these same old stories, y'all. They're going to try to keep activating us in the same old ways. And we literally saw that a couple of days ago. How many of y'all saw the what Trump put out with those racist pictures of Michelle and Barack? How many of y'all saw that, right? What's the same old trope Black folks that are they put Michelle and Barack's face onto a chimp or monkey's bodies, right? So if you look online, you can see these kind of caricatures of the Obamas as monkeys, right? And it was disgusting, right? And Trump did it because he needed a reaction. He wanted a reaction. There was a way that exactly it wasn't surprising. Sam is saying it's not surprising. It wasn't surprising. It's the same old storyline. The structure needs to show you how it loves you, and it loves us through humiliation, through dehumanization and degradation. But if we don't buy into that, if we don't keep giving our offerings to it, if we don't keep feeding it, right, does the story land the same way? And this is what we're being asked to do, because do we keep reacting? Do we keep trying to defend ourselves with a motherfucker who literally shits himself on national TV, right? When we stop reacting in the way they want, it goes away. Exactly, Shay. So this is where the idea of where are our heads lying, because the floor is going to constantly keep moving comes in. This is what Saturn is saying. It's time to grow up. It is time to grow up and stop buying into the same old tropes. It is time to grow up and stop reacting to the same old origin stories, the same old storylines. Saturn this week is at 29 degrees. It's a critical degree. It's a critical degree. Why? Because the Great Mother is about to emerge. She has been slowly coming up from the deep waters. Therefore, releasing more and more of those waters, of that stories, of those kind of dissolving of the structures. Remember, Saturn rules structures. Saturn rules time. Saturn rules reality. It rules authority. It also rules the margins. In the deep waters of Pisces, as it also hits Neptune a few times, Neptune dissolves things. So does Pisces. Pisces dissolves things as well. What has been dissolving in the way that those stories have been holding on to us? They don't hit anymore, right? How do we stop giving our authority up? Well, we realize we have to stop giving our faith up. Faith, Pisces, Neptune. As Saturn meets Neptune at the end of this week, and then next week actually is conjunct at 0 degrees fully for the first time in a very long time. We are being asked not only to write new stories, but to believe in new ways forward by bending our understanding of time and reality, by bending the way in which we understand who and what we give our authority to. So then we have to stop feeding the same structures and feed something else. So do we know how to feed ourselves? Right? We have to give up the addiction, exactly, Shay, to the doing the right thing. So this is a time of deconstruction. This is a time of deconstruction, y'all, and I really do mean that, because we've been addicted. Exactly as Shane pointed out, we've been addicted because Neptune rules addiction, so does Pisces. What have we been addicted to? We've been addicted to believing somebody else's goddamn understanding of who we are. We've been addicted to believing as if we can't take care of ourselves. We've been addicted to this idea that somebody else is going to come save us, which is nothing but a goddamn fantasy. Right? We've been addicted to performing revolution, but being docile in action. So what does it mean to take our head back? Right? So finding our creative feet. We go from the feet, Pisces, to the head, Aries. Personal planets are how we communicate, how we move, how we understand. The crossroads, Mercury, Venus, our love, our relationships, the North Node, where we're trying to go, our feet. They have to grow up to meet the head, where Saturn is, where Neptune lies, right? So this is about finding our creative feet, because what stories do we need to think, rewrite, and reweave? Pisces, again, in Saturn, dissolve structures that are keeping us from accessing this creativity. So the systems that try to confine us are dissolving. And we're seeing what they want, right? More and more. So this administration, as it's giving us these racist ass tropes, is also removing more and more of the structures that allowed people to have access to these institutions. But at the same time, we have to make we got to tell ourselves the truth, though. If the institutions really were that strong, could they have been dissolved so quickly? Because that man came in, right? That man came in the second time and said, bet, I got you. And that shit's been gone. He's dismantled most of the majority of the infrastructures and institutions that we need to have our basic needs met. but were they actually meeting our basic needs to begin with? Those two questions have to sit side by side, y'all. And it is not a binary. It is not a, oh, this is right and this is wrong. Deconstruction, here we go once again, because we have to take back the ways in which we even analyze the historical record from the colonial logic. Shit is not linear, nor is it progressive, right? We are literally seeing how things operate at the same time in multiple timelines simultaneously. So the logics that we've been given, South Node and Virgo, the logics we've been given about what is logical, what is analytical, what is so-called the right way to understand logics has all been disintegrated. Why? Because the state don't even believe in its own goddamn methodology, right? He took away that education first. Why? Because education was the location of the institution that helped construct the nation. And that is why you cannot remove the economic system from that, because the way the university system was being able to fund itself before the United States was actually a nation state was by being in bed with the goddamn planters. Planters of what, y'all? Motherfucking plantations down in the Caribbean. And the South, but down in the Caribbean. So funny enough, and Shay is absolutely right in the comments, Trump is giving us the playbook we're complaining about and we are not taking heed. And that is not giving that motherfucker any kind of credit. All right, so don't sit here and talk about, oh, here comes Dr. Rouse or here comes Nicole. This must be MAGA light. No, it's not. Get your head out of a binary. It has never been a binary. That is the point we are trying to say. Saturn goes into Aries. It is said to be a detriment. No, it is not. She is saying you better bend and break that time. You better bend and break the concepts of everything we've been taught about. What? Look to the sister sign, Libra. You better bend and break your understanding of relationships, of balance, of justice, and of money. Therefore, the construct of love. Because ain't a goddamn thing about this state loving. So if it was that strong, that stable, that democracy and freedom making, then that man who literally can't even hold his bowels, okay, would not have been able to come in a second time, begin with, and then take away that shit like that. And no one do a thing. And no one do a thing. Oh, we so big and bad, right? America's a big, bad bully. But kowtows to one of the biggest con men who is nothing more than a bully. All right? So then what are we made of, y'all? Are we really big and bad like that? Do we understand? We got to find some feats. We get on our goddamn heads. It's time to create new stories. Right? And so this is why we're uncomfortable, y'all. Why? We're uncomfortable. We're uncomfortable because we're being asked to queer everything. We're being asked to queer everything. When Saturn is in Aries, it is queer. It bends and breaks things. It breaks what? Tradition, culture, time, reality, structure, systems. Why? Because it centers the margins. It's all right there, y'all. Take the story back and rewrite it. Who said that we must make Saturn the patriarch? As the stars are literally saying, we are doing a reset. Neptune, though, deep waters, the one that constructs the stories that make the structures, is meeting the planet of structure, right? In the first sign of the zodiac, ruled by what? The planet of Mars. That is action. That is strategy. Mars now being in the sign of Saturn right now in Aquarius, next to that sun. What are the actions are we taking, y'all? What actions are we actually taking? Well, it's time to what? Find that Saturn, grow up. We got to make the new stories. Because if the shit was that solid, it wouldn't have broken so quickly. So now it's time to what? Put your money where your mouth is and actually queer some shit. Right? And this is why I say it's time to deconstruct. Because we have been so groomed to be ashamed of our bodies and what we feel. in the ways that we are being told to not be curious. So when curiosity comes up, we have then been told to what? Demonize it in one way, shape, or form. Whether it be literally you are told it's demonic from that preacher with them tight ass pants on that pulpit, or you have been told to intellectualize it because you went into that ivory tower and they told you to remove yourself from yourself so that you can be objectively, right, docile to the self. Whatever way it goes, y'all, right? Whatever way it goes. Because we have been taught to not trust the self via the body, but the body is now alive. The body is screaming out. The body is saying, I am here's another logic. South Node and Virgo, you have had to probably release some literal shit. If your body literally cannot take the same foods anymore, if you have had bowel issues, we're going to keep talking about bowels for a reason, y'all, because the body needs to be cleared out so you can make space for your own spirit. So this week is this energy, right? It is time to queer some shit, and we are going into Valentine's Day on Saturday. What does love mean to you? What is love? Because we have water here. Yeah, Pisces and Mercury are going to be in the deep waters. It's going to be cute. But Saturn moves into Aries. We're going to have some grown ass cute. We're going to need some grown ass love, right? We're going to need a new story about what love really means, because love is action via fire. We are moving into fire with water and air. Steam, y'all. And in that steam, there's a cleansing, right? We're going to ritualize. This is about us also being very clear that we're going to have to take care of the body. It is a time to bring in the ritual once again. So ritualizations, what we take time for, bending time, bending reality, taking back time. It's not just the words. People love to quote Maxine, well, take back your time means you're actually going to break some shit. It means you're going to have to prioritize some things, right? Differently. So you're queering your sense of time and reality. This is why I'm doing the Queering Chaos Conversation Project, y'all. And so February 17th is my last Queering Chaos panel. And that is the new moon in Aquarius with the solar eclipse, with a lunar new year. And literally, it is a time to collectively conjure. All right. It's a time to collectively conjure. And that's why I wanted to, it was actually serendipitous. I didn't even know that when Whitney offered me a Dorothy. So Whitney is the owner. Her and her wife own Dorothy Downstairs. It's a lesbian speakeasy bar. It's a beautiful space. And when I gave the proposal to do the panel series there, she offered me every third Tuesday of the month. This is way back in last June. When I signed the contract in July, and then I put it in the calendar, I realized inadvertently that she had given me the dates of essentially every new moon until we hit Pisces. And I said, okay, well now if this is literally aligning with the cosmos, let me queer some shit. And so it has literally been, I agree, Liv, it's literally been an astrological timing of these events. And so I'm ending my series by queering dreams and dreaming with the collective, because we have got to collectively dream. We've got to collectively conjure, right? But that means that we have to turn these conversations into action. If we are going to use the air, if we're going to keep breathing this shit out, stop breathing out nonsense and start breathing in life. Right? So if we can find the self and those cells come together and you find your weird folks, Aquarius is the weird, y'all. Aquarius is when Saturn realizes that the structures and systems in Capricorn need to shift. Well, then the Aquarius needs to realize and take those structures, take that knowledge and pour it out and create something different. But in order to do that, you got to look to your heart. Leo, where is your sun? So I want to do that collectively with folks, right? Because let's be real, this idea of turning conservative right now is not going to save us. It's not going to save you. And I see it everywhere in all the populations. Folks, you're seeing this encroachment of conservative logic once again, right? Whether it be in communities of quote unquote color, talking about, three-quarter length shirts, or kind of being respectable or upholding these ideals of doing the quote unquote right successful thing, to quite frankly queer communities who are ashamed, who are being kink shaming and all these other ways of conservative logics coming in that are being framed as somehow the right way to live, right? It's not going to save you. It's not going to save you. And I say that because we have the evidence of it not saving us. So do we believe the historical record if we take away the colonial sight and logic and understanding of time? If we deconstructed our attachments to a system, to a succubus energy structure that has already told us it doesn't like us? Ah, love. What if we understood love through care and not through harshness? What if we understood love through an embodiment of nurturing versus harshness? We have to queer these things, y'all. This is the vulnerability coming out. Saturn is moving up. She has had to release the shackles of the patriarch and write a new story next to Neptune and Aries. So it is time to queer things, and that's going to be uncomfortable because now you're going to have to go inside of you and ask yourself where you have digested your oppressor and reproduced it, and now you are giving your offering back. You are taking your offering back, right? Fire. We're in a time of fire and air. So what are you feeding? Right? And if you want to take that fire back and move it somewhere else, then that is how you start to build your own reality. And you don't do it by yourself. So Aquarius is here to remind us, right? That the most revolutionary thing you can do is figure out how we care for ourselves and one another. Because this new moon, once again, is at 28 degrees. Cancer, here we come again. But Cancer via what? The collective. And the structures of the collective, how we structure our collectives, right? And this is, again, ruled by the sign of the great mother in Aries, right? So the head. So it's time to take up the space in the body so you own your own head, y'all. A growing up collectively of what it means for us to dream and bend reality to our will. As Saturn and Aries again bends time, authority, culture, tradition, structures, and systems. So what are you bending this time and reality to? This is a crime of queering some shit. So if you're in Chicago, come on out the 17th of this month, Tuesday, the new moon, 7 p.m. Queering Dreams and Dreaming. I'm going to be talking with Forrest, my friend, Forrest Brooks, who's a DJ. He's going to be spitting the records as we work with music to conjure. And then I'm also be talking with Dr. Moya Bailey, as she's the one facilitating this conversation. And we're going to bring down spirit along with the audience. As I did last time, I'll take the audience to the crossroads so that we can meet ourselves collectively. And in doing so, then I'll have a big old butcher block paper, and ask folks to take the dreams that they have and plant the seed by putting it down, bringing the offering down onto the page. And if you want to activate it then, because afterwards Forrest will be spinning, before you leave, in order to activate it, right, the offering you give is you can shake your ass in order to make that offering that you just put down on that page. And then you are making the commitment once you leave that space to doing one action that will bring that dream into reality. Activation. And I mean that shit, y'all. Time for the ritual to come back individually and collectively, right? Individually and collectively. It's a time for us to ritualize taking care of ourselves via our bodies. And the care is not these kind of docile, just only doing a scrub or, a self-care day. No, you know where self-care came in? The Panthers again, but through who? The women. The women and the kids. That's where a lot of this self-care via activism came in. That's where it first came in, alongside what? Focusing on taking care of the community via taking care of the kids. Right? So all of those community care programs, that's what made the Panthers dangerous. They centered care and built community that way. But then what happened? The men just had to wave their fucking dicks around because God forbid, right, that a patriarch is not the one who's the face and in charge of these things. So when we also look at the historical record, y'all, and these movements that we love to consume but don't actually learn from, we need to make sure we're not using the sight of our oppressors still to understand those historical locations. Because a lot of our elders, a lot of the ones that are propped up, were honestly not well, and or the ones who were reproducing the same violence internally. But they get a pass, right? And the ones who built the structures, once again, bones are used and picked apart. So what if we stopped? What if we stopped picking apart the carcasses of our dead? Pluto's in Aquarius, and allowed them to grow as well, because Neptune is in Aries. Pluto might be ushering the dead, but Neptune, because where the dead lie, where Neptune is also bringing some up to the shore so that they can also grow too. Everyone is growing up right now, including the dead. So it's also a rise of the cultural worker, y'all. And I'm excited for this. We've been here and it's going to be very big, right? This idea of story building and storytelling and story weaving is really important. Because in doing so, what we are going to start having to see is a rise of new stories, of new archetypes. This is the rise of also new gods. New gods appear when new archetypes come because new dreams emerge. And so, who is the God? What are the gods that we are trying to resurrect? Well, what if it was the self? So, this is why the creative feat is really important, because you got to find your creative feat so that you know what stories need to be retold, rewritten, or reweaved. So since Pisces dissolves things and Saturn got dissolved, so did Neptune. Neptune was dissolving all kinds of shit. We were living in all kinds of la la land. We had all kinds of folks coming up claiming all this authority over in with spirit. We were manifesting shit. People were loving enlightened things, saying go to a 5D, right? All of that is now coming to what? A hard reality as realities collide. And so we're going to be it's going to be really interesting. The ability for the collective to create new structures out of what already is, to create by creating new stories about where we do come from. And this to me is where the Super Bowl comes in. Because when we talk about Saturn and Aries, right? But Mercury's in Pisces and Venus is in Pisces as well as with this North Node. And we're going to have a really big storytelling mechanism happening today that's going to have a lasting effect as we go forward about identity. Because when Saturn goes into Aries later this week, Neptune is already there. This is also about bending and breaking identity because Aries is the head. Aries is your sense of self. Aries is you, the identity of you. What is the story of your identity and how is it tied to the structures and systems that you are a part of? And as we build new structures of society, we got to be very careful that we don't reproduce the same one built around nationhood. So, Super Bowl, American pastime, right? American football. Only place that really plays that shit is here, right? And we get the halftime show, and it's going to be Benito, right? Bad Bunny. And his album has been critically acclaimed. He just won a Grammy. I think it was the first time they said that a Latin artist in Spanish, in the Spanish language, has won Album of the Year. And that's a lot of firsts, right? Last year, Beyonce was the first. For her, it was her first Album of the Year after being nominated for many, many years. So we get these kind of firsts that are appearing, interestingly enough, right? Last year, this year. But there's a stark difference between the way that Beyonce's rendition of her attachments to the nation state via identity and Benito, Bad Bunny's attachments to the nation state via identity have been received in the public and on social media. When Beyonce did her Super Bowl, not Super Bowl, the halftime show for Christmas, over a year ago. So it was 24 before we hit 25. Right? There was a lot of iconography of the American flag because her album, Cowboy Carter, was an indictment of the U.S. nation state via the iconography of said state, which is the flag. And you saw this in the lyrics of her album. You saw this very, very tellingly in the imagery of that show. Now, as I say this, I'm not saying to like her, if you have to like her or not like her, right? Get out of the binary. Get out of the binary way of thinking as we engage in this conversation, okay? This is a deconstruction process. So as she's telling and retelling this story, an origin story of nationhood through the lens of her lineage, because she's very clear in that very first song, American Requiem, when she is giving the genealogy of where she comes from and making it very clear that she's reclaiming what was stolen from her and her bloodline by reclaiming the story and retelling it through that perspective and lens. It is a breaking of a linear and binary way of understanding American identity via the construction of race, because you cannot separate the two. There is a way that I can not do these conversations anymore about, if you talk about race and you're being racist and, we're all the same and, it's only black people and black fatigue talk about race. Shut the fuck up already and grow the fuck up. The only reason why we're talking about race is because it's embedded in the goddamn structure of the fucking nation state. All right? Blame your raggedy ass forefathers and their kin. I am sick of it. Tell the damn truth and shame the goddamn devil y'all created and conjured and brought up to the surface that we got to now sit in this fucking hellscape because all y'all talk about is hell and demons and damnation. And here we go, and here we are, and conjured it once again. Do y'all not believe in the power of the spoken word, y'all, and conjure in the dreams? Whose dreams are you dreaming, and what happens if you break from the reality that is not actually yours and step into your own head? So it's an example. It's a template. I'm not even saying it's you just do exactly what Beyonce did, but it's showing a different way to tell an origin story from the perspective of the body that was dehumanized and made to be seen as somehow less than, but in which the state only can survive and be alive if it feeds off of said body. The dichotomy, the inconsistency, right? The blood is literally in the soil, exactly, Liv. So if our bodies and blood, the body and blood of Jesus, well, if our bodies and blood have mingled with this land, with this soil, if there was not an engineering constructed by this nation to construct a people that it could then use over space and time, both for the commodification of its economic system, but also as use it as a scapegoat to ignore the fact and to feign ignorance of its violent past, right? Well, when the subaltern fucking speak, we get a really clear understanding of just how ready the population is for a different story. Then a couple months later, Kendrick takes the stage last year around this time for the Super Bowl. And in his way, he indicts the United States by telling the story of its origin story from this perspective of the black man, from the perspective of Uncle Sam, actually, telling the truth of what Uncle Sam really is. But then again, the backlash, because that is American nationalism. How dare you? How dare us? We are too stupid. Black people are too dumb in America to understand what it means to put a flag up. But here we go now. Puerto Rico flags everywhere. The symbol of a nation. And a man whose album is fine. I have nothing against Bad Bunny, but who initially came out and was very much queer baiting internationally, and now has transformed into the embodiment and the symbol of a nation bound to a history and a story of triangulation of racial identities via the concept of mestizaje. So everybody is somehow indigenous and black and Spanish at the same time, but also at the same time a subjugated people from by a state that is imperialist in nature. So now he becomes a symbol of a nation, of a story of freedom making and freedom taking that everyone nationally, internationally now can get around. They can understand the utilization, the perspective of a nation state's origin story from another location, as long as that body is still somehow acceptable to tell the new story. What's our attachments to needing a patriarch, a man, a light skin, to be able to dictate what revolution is? And when I say this, I know it's going to get twisted, because if you look at it through a binary lens, I'm saying Beyonce bad, Benito good. No, or Beyonce good, Benito bad. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying, do we know how to tell a different story? Because the story of putting our identities around imagined communities constructed via a nation state that needs boundaries in its various ways that are usually upheld in violent locations that require, in some way, shape, or form, the dehumanization of populations that tend to be dark in nature, who then also tend to get erased via certain colonial projects when the language is Spanish and Portuguese versus English. What are we really doing here for freedom making and taking if the template is still the same thing, just trapped in a different font? What did I say at the very beginning? A copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. It then gets faded and faded over time so that it becomes so whitened out, so whitewashed out. What was the origin to begin with? What was the goal to begin with? That is what I want us to ask these questions. It's a curiosity. But when we use the colonial logic and the colonial sight and vision, while also claiming to being decolonial or abolitionist or whatever anti-oppressive in nature, what are we really doing here, y'all? What are we really doing? Who's really doing the tricking? Because Mercury is the crossroad. The crossroad is in the deep waters. So the crossroad is down below. That bitch is flow, right? You got to be careful you're not tricking yourself. You got to be careful you're not fooling yourself. Claiming revolutionary, but the body has not been inactivated. So therefore, you are the vessel that is being used to construct and create somebody else's reality. So whose dreams are you dreaming? Right? So this is why I say we need new stories. But these new stories require new families, new bloodlines, new understandings of what the collective is. But collectives form when we understand the self. So who is allowed to reclaim their bloodline? Who's allowed to be able to take up the space? Who do we look to for our templates? And can we stop using the logic of our oppressor as a form of liberation? Uranus went direct in Taurus. So there is still this kind of last-ditch effort of Uranus to have us shake up some shit in the place in which we can hold on to things a little too much, in which we think it is already safe and secure. And Taurus being a Venus-ruled sign, the earth, feminine version, it is our embodiment, literally. It's how we feed ourselves. It's the throat. It's our food systems. It's our infrastructures. It's also our money, right? But the ruler of Taurus is in Pisces right now, where she loves to be, next to that north node with Mercury. Uranus being the higher octave of Mercury. What the hell does all this mean, y'all? We are being asked to shake things up because the shaking is already here. Change is here. Uranus is saying you're going to have to create the new reality, y'all. Because when Uranus moves into Gemini in April and stays there for the next 7 years, baby, when I say we're going to get hit with all kinds of cons and scammers around technology, we're already hitting it now. They're already showing us that the Bitcoin shit was nothing more than a pyramid scheme, right? Anyone could have told you that now. But we love getting scammed. Americans in particular love getting scammed. But let's be real. Scamming is foundational to the colonial project, right? Scamming is foundational to capitalism, racial capitalism. You can't have racial capitalism unless you got a system of scamming and motherfuckers who like to be scammed. Right? So which one are you doing? Are you scamming or doing the scamming? And what happens if we then construct different economic systems based upon different ways in which we do exchange so that scamming is not foundational to the way in which the system can be maintained? So we got to stop scamming ourselves. And one of the ways in which we do that is we have to realize that as we believe that this external thing is going to get us free, that thinking that something is outside of us is going to free us will always keep us trapped in these stories that will then reproduce in some way, shape, or form the structures of these nation states. And as we're seeing, it's not just the United States. There is a worldwide takeover of various states turning authoritarian. Why? Because it's a fucking Ponzi scheme, y'all. Like, because it was always a Ponzi scheme. None of this shit was sustainable. It's not just the US. We ain't shit. We also know that. We also know we ain't shit. And you know who knows we ain't shit the most? Black Americans and indigenous folk. We know, y'all, the state ain't shit. But folks don't like black folks. This is what racism gets you. This is what racism gets you. Racism gets you believing your oppressor so much that you do his work for him while he is playing in your face. And the folks over here saying, I don't know if you want to do that. I don't, he ain't, he gonna do to you what he did to us. No. Okay. Keep believing it. Right? You want to play in my face, but really you're playing in your own. So the Super Bowl, I argue, in the reaction to Benito's performance, will give us a really good temperature of just how ready the collective is to truly take back our power and rewrite different structures and different stories. And it's not just one collective, it's collectives. So I need you to believe you, your environment, and who's around you. And I need you to also get really clear about what it is that you do need and want and who you want around you. Because if we're going to build new worlds, if we're going to create new structures, it starts with our family systems. It starts with who's around us. It starts with how we understand how we treat one another. I keep saying this and I'm going to keep saying it because the cosmos keep saying it, okay? They keep talking the same goddamn thing, so I'm going to keep talking the same thing because they're trying to get us to understand that we have the power. We have the ability to write a new contract, but what is the contract we are writing collectively? Because the nodes are in Virgo and Pisces. The axis of mess. The axis of mess. And we need to look at our mess. We cannot keep trying to analyze it and bullet point it and, try to criticize it away. We're going to have to come into a different understanding of the collective responsibility, of the Piscean kind of understanding of faith. Because when those nodes this year shift over into Aquarius and Leo, oh, baby, this is going to get loud because this is now the fixedness of it. This is the stability of it, right? Because now we're getting to the axis of God. We're going from mess to God. Woo! And we know this God's a messy hoe. The one that's leading us that's leading these nation states right now is a messy hoe, a war god and dangerous hoe, who also feels the pressure of his whole being slipping. So you're going to see the rise of the patriarch trying to double down in its dealings. And again, the U.S. is not the only state that's trying to regulate the family structure, whether it be controlling the women's bodies or those who can give birth, or controlling who can marry who with all these rise of these homosexual, anti-homosexual laws, anti-LGBTQ laws in other locations. We are seeing the ways in which conservative logic is trying to still maintain itself via the structure of the nation state, because a nation state is inherently conservative and violent in nature, y'all. Right? So I'm not saying that Benito repping PR is bad. I'm saying, what does it mean to use the nation state as the location of creating our imagined communities that create our collectives? And we got to be real careful because we know the nation state, the Western nation state, but let's be real, so is the East, because Japan ain't no motherfucking better, okay? Let's be real with that. They ain't no goddamn better. We know the only way these nation states were able to maintain themselves was by constructing the idea of the human via anti-Blackness and anti-indigeneity. It is embedded in it. So whether you have a strict binary of one drop rule that you have in most English-speaking colonies that are now nation states, or you are a nation state who bought into the myth of mestizaje, so everyone has fucked themselves out. Either way it goes, it's just the Janus face of one another, y'all. Right? So I am asking us all to ask ourselves, do we know how to tell a different story? Because it's going to help us get into a different archetype so that we can see ourselves differently, different identities. Identity is breaking. Identity is breaking. All of it is breaking. And I'm going to talk about this some more because I have some more opinions and some more topics that are a bit more controversial, but it's because we need to bring in the so-called controversy. Is it controversial, or do we just not want to ask certain questions? Right? Do we not want to rock the boat? Because if we bring up a certain question, it moves us away from a yes or no, a binary, a logic that requires us to sit in this constant dichotomy, right? That keeps us bounded. This is why language is so important in the colonial project, y'all. This is why having people remove themselves from their native language and speak the language of their oppressor was highly important, alongside removing folks from their land and disconnecting them from their ancestors, as a way to make the space for a different entity to take hold. And that is this Christian patriarch, the Christian white nationalist. We see this around the world, right? Because when you bring somebody else's language in, it confines and constricts the tongue, therefore constricting the mind. And so it's a way to kind of cut out the ability to imagine and dream of something different. And one of the most confining languages is English. It is very harsh. It is very binary. It is, and over time, English itself has become more rigid, has become more strict, has become more colonial. Honestly, it's why different languages, when you listen to them speak, and especially poetry, it just just sounds better. The shit just be goddamn, right? It just be taking you different places. It's not so yes, no. And as a poet, I wish sometimes my languages were different. I'd be trying to, so I got to queer it, right? Because honestly, linguistically, I am a hoe. I think it's a great way. I think it's a great place to be a hoe in curiosity and language, and this the kind of different ideas. Can we allow ourselves to get more curious, right? To expand the mind, to allow ourselves. This is why food is so important. This is why stories are so important. This is why people break bread. This is also why in times of war, people come to the table with bread to speak and figure out a different way forward. Because you cannot use violence all the time, right? Art hole in the background, exactly, right? Because open-ended questions will make you uncomfortable. It's exactly what Eden's saying. So if we realize that there is no guarantee, there is no right answer. There's no right answer. That's why I'm not saying that Benito's Super Bowl performance is like awful and he's a national. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, can we ask some fucking questions? Because we saw the lack of questioning and lack of curiosity folks had after Beyonce's and after Kendrick's performances. That actually, if we stopped always trying to perform intelligence, because it's only a fucking performance, because some of this shit don't make no goddamn sense what was said. If we stop trying to perform intelligence because we think we own intelligence, if you own the conversation, right, and all you doing is owning your stupidity in the public, it is not a skill that I would want to own and then show. Let's be real here, okay? If folks would have just gotten more curious about it, there was all kinds of things you could have engaged with those performances. With the albums themselves, putting them in conversation. Cowboy Carter with Bad Bunny's latest album, right? With Kendrick's shit, I would also put it in conversation with Doechie's, because it's the reclaiming, it's reclamation in different ways. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, we're not curious, we want to be right. And you're trying to be right in a raggedy ass structure that ain't never been right, that has to move the floor, right? That literally doesn't believe its own methodologies, like I said earlier. So one of the first things that did go after, Trump went after, was the Department of Education. Why? Because they know that if you make people stupid, they'll do what you want to do. And if you make people scared and ignorant and sick at the same time, then they become more docile. But guess what? The structures weren't doing a lot for us anyway. That's the gag. That's the gag. Can we believe that? Can we understand that? A lot of us were talking about this shit 15 years ago in higher ed, 10 years ago in higher ed. There was already a crisis of higher ed occurring because of a lack of a population, y'all. I was sitting in board meetings. I've talked about this before. I was sitting in board meetings when I was working at Beloit, and we would have all of these conversations because of the projections from I think it was from like 2026 on, was that there was going to be a dramatic drop in the population because there weren't enough kids. We had all these goddamn schools, especially small liberal arts schools, in particular in the Northeast, that are tuition driven. When you are a tuition driven school, you will eventually end up being having to end up being just a hoe. You really will, because you're going to have to get it from anywhere because you are dependent upon that tuition. And running an institution, running a higher ed university, a college, just even running a regular school is expensive. Why? Because of upkeep, infrastructure. It's not sexy at all, but it's necessary so you can breathe, so that you don't have mold growing when you close up the damn dorms all summer and then open them up, and you never listen to folks that said, oh, you might need to, be having maintenance of this. You always defer it. Any budget, y'all, any budget, I swear to God, any budget you see, especially in an institution, you're going to have a line called deferred maintenance. And all that is kicking down the canned shit that until it becomes a real problem will always be seen as something that could be deferred. Right? Dreams deferred. Shit. That's why I always said when I was sitting at those tables, I'm like, I'm going to ask for forgiveness versus permission, because once I heard deferred, I know that shit was never going to come to fruition. You know what I'm saying? So there is a way, right, that it was already cracked. They were already trying to figure out different ways. And one of the biggest ways that universities were trying to stave off this impending kind of drop in populations was then finding different ways to get income. This is when you see the rise of master's programs. All right. You see the rise of master's programs and a lot of these big Ivies. Again, when I left Brown I left Brown in 2021, but in 2019, 2020, they were building a whole new department of graduates, of master's graduate studies. Associate dean, building, staff, and the like, because that's where their moneymaker was. And they're not the only ones. Because you can charge a full year's tuition. And again, this is also dependent upon having international students. What was one of the biggest populations of international students coming in and paying full tuition and being able to run these programs? China. That's not a conspiracy. That's just international politics, y'all. Because guess who was before China, one of the biggest populations of international students who were coming in before 9/11? The Middle East. When I was in school, when I was going to undergrad, we had a large population of kids coming from the Caribbean, and then also North Africa, all around North Africa. Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, all the like, right? Because there was an exchange going on. This was also part of international politics. You politic. They call it soft power. I call it the foundational power. You politic via knowledge, y'all. That's how you exchange shit. The 9/11 hit, then politics shifted, and then all of a sudden we were at war. All these wars come in. This is after the 90s wars. There were supposed to be peace treaties, hence why opening up the education, and then all that shit got cut. Because education was also being used, right, as a way to train a population to essentially be able to gather information for the state. Again, that's not a conspiracy theory. That's what I was trained in. As an anthropologist being trained in the early 2000s, we had to sign. We were taught this in our methodology classes. And then there was a one point for the AAAs, the American Anthropological Association, where we had a whole big thing about ethics. And we were not allowed, if you were going to be a part of the organization and be seen as legitimate, you weren't allowed to take certain funding from the government because they were using that information for their own benefit. That is not a conspiracy. That's what the states do, y'all. Fuck. Makes my ass ache. It's not a conspiracy. It's called international politics. Like, fuck. Right? That's how you infiltrate. That's also how you move power. It's ideology. I need folks to realize that. So when you're going on these social media platforms for the past year, it has been a constant cultural war that's been going on for a while. It's not just Russia and the bots and all of that shit. That's one way we're at a cultural war. The other way we're at a cultural war is the ways that these nation states are trying to sell their nation to you. right? First, it was the uncovering of this is where the real luxury goods are, right? When those tariffs came in, I said, touche, China, touche. Here we go. This is the war. We're at war, right? That's not a secret. If you like, that really isn't a big secret, but the unveiling of where people could go direct was in a direct response to challenge the ways in which they were going to war economically. Because the goddamn nation, all these nation states, all of them, all of them operate through a capitalistic means that needs a lower class in one way, shape, or form to exploit. If it's not gonna, you're not gonna exploit internally, you'll exploit somebody else's population. Do not get this shit twisted. So now you open up and talk about the luxury goods, right? I ain't mad. The thing is, I can't be mad. I just, you gotta know what the playbook is, right? So again, if we stop trying to make somebody good and somebody bad and just take the step back and look at the goddamn playbook, y'all, then we know who the players are and we can make a different strategy and play over here. Do you see what I'm saying? So then after that, now it's telling about how the cost of living is so much cheaper. Cost of living is so, you can get these fancy and everything is so more technologically advanced. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Please tell these Americans how raggedy our shit is. And this has been, again, this is not nothing new. We've always been raggedy technologically. Even when we were making this facade that we were leading in technological advancements, no, we weren't, y'all. No, we weren't. You know what we were doing? We were shipping out outsourcing all that shit, so that was the beginning of having corporations get all the money and making your labor population less skilled so that they are easily controlled when you move them into kind of quote unquote technology automation. Again, these are playbooks. It's not a conspiracy. It's the lifeline of an economic system based on exploitation. Can we tell a new story? Saturn and Aries next to Neptune. Can we own the head by getting some grounding in our feet and understanding that we are the ones at the crossroad? So where do our faith lie in? Shit don't make no sense. So now we get told how cheap it is to live, how technologically advanced it is, how you don't need a lot of money even to live because, and even the poor areas, right? At least people have their basic needs met. And that's again not new. I'm not mad at China. I'm not mad. I'm not mad. Just know what the fuck's going on, y'all. It's propaganda. All of it is because it's selling us an image of a state, and they're not the only ones to do it. Let's wind it on back. I said this before in the 90s. A lot of these Western nation states did that when they were trying to move away from the facade of conservatism that Thatcherism and the aftermath of Reaganomics and its aftermath had. Once those parties no longer were in power in the UK and the US, you had the rise of Tony Blair, New Labour in the UK, you have Clinton and his fucking saxophone in the US. They weren't nothing more than just light conservatives, both of them, let's be fucking real. But what happened, both of them, because the nations were undergoing a kind of shift in politics, they went through a rebranding. It was all propaganda. This is a propaganda. It's a rebranding, y'all. It's media. So at the time in the 90s, mid and late 90s in the UK, I got pictures of it. You have pictures of women, a Muslim woman in a hijab with the stars, with not the stars and stripes, with the British flag painted on her face. Right. In the US, you get the color blindness mixed with United Colors of Benetton campaigns, right? Very consumerism. But again, these images of nation states that are multicultural and progressive, either multicultural because you're a melting pot or because you're accepting, but it really wasn't accepting. It was called tolerance in the UK. In the US, it was called the melting pot. And that led very quickly into color blindness and all this shit. Okay, so why am I saying all that? It's a rebranding, y'all. So now that the US is showing its ass and it's not very good. It can't live up to even its images, right? Other nations are able to actually practice a bit more of what they preach. So now China's just showing you, well, this is what we got for you. This is what we got, baby. So what you got? You know, like this is the reality hitting of the structures and the facades of the structures. The emperor has no clothes showing. So do we believe? And if we believe, right, then what does it mean to write a new story about who we are and the identities that we construct that then create our communities, our imagined communities, right? So that we can then have sustainable structures moving forward. This is the energy of this week. So let's start. And it starts with how we understand love. how we understand love, right? Because I agree, Shay, color blindness is censorship and erasure with permission, right? So we've given ourselves permission to be blinded, to be fooled by a fool. Because the state's a fool. And you can't tell me the state's a fool because it's run by a fool. But that fool was elected by a collective. So how do our leaders become a mirror to the collective? That's a good question, Jess. With the naked emperor, are we supposed to be the tailor or the child? Right? That's a great question. What if we were the child? The nodes move into Aquarius and Leo. That's actually a really interesting question. The nodes move into Aquarius and Leo soon. So the collective is actually being asked to tap into its child again. Leo is the child. Leo is the heart. It's the son. It's the father. Yes, but it's also the child at its heart. And as these new moons are in these signs, right? The sign of Cancer, a Cancerian degree, is the degree. We have to remember that a lot of us had our childhood stolen because children are property in these projects. They're also the property of the patriarch. But if we move away and understand Saturn to be the matriarch, to be the crone, to emerge once again, asking us to rethink our structures and systems via the structure of the family, and we think about a matriarchal type of structure, it is not the opposite of the patriarch at all. Not at all. It is a different way of understanding of care, of nurturing, of relationships, of love. And as a mother myself, who is working and friends with other mothers, both queer and non, or they don't know they're queer yet, and also living in a very queer household, right? The way of raising a child to allow themselves to just be a child, right? It's been very loud to me that until we start to parent and grandparent our inner child, a lot of us need to grandparent our inner child. There is no way we're going to be able to create a new structure because we don't know how to play. So if we understand the emperor is naked, then now we do realize that we're going to have to be able to create something new. So where does our creation lie? Well, it usually lies in our childhood. I love this question. So in order to become the tailor that constructs the structures, you got to be the child that experiments and plays, that can imagine what the structures will be that you will then be stitching together. Write a new story. So we got to get childlike. We got to experiment. We got to play in order to figure out then what we're tailoring together to construct these new ways, these new systems, these new ways of being. All right. All right. Let me stop there, y'all, because I can keep going. And I will keep going, actually. So if you want to see me go and you're in Chicago, come on out next week. The 17th, Queering Dreams and Dreaming, the last of my Queering Chaos project. And I'm working on some things for what's going to come next. I'm going to take a little break after this panel series, but the project is going to be projecting. It's just the beginning. I'm also going to be at Babe's Babe's Sports Bar this Saturday for this Saturday, Valentine's Day. I'll be doing a pop-up astrology readings, 20 minutes for $30. And so basically we can see if you're in Chicago, you want to see how these transits will be impacting you and how you can engage with this energy of love that gives you the liberation of the self, then come on out and let's get into it, okay? Let's get into it. And I'm going to talk about that for a minute, y'all, for a second. It's funny. So I also have a number of new astrology readings. You can go on my website and you can see my various astrology readings that I have. And something's been really interesting lately. I love giving the readings, and I love shifting the kind of readings I give based upon my interests. My friends say this because of my tism. I just say it's because I'm curious. Okay. So I got a special interest in looking at the year for people based on these transits, also looking at working with Saturn if she's the crone, astrological middle age, transits for returning clients, and also what I see. What I've been getting from clients lately is they'll say something like, wow, that's really deep, right? When I go in and do a reading. And if I've given you a reading, and you've said that this is no shade, I'm understanding it more now. And so I recently had a couple of clients who were asked me in their intake form about the relationships and their relationship patterns and saying, whether, relationships are going to change, what's coming in and or why does my life feel so hard right now? Y'all, I'm going to say this with a lot of love. Do not ask a complex question and not expect a complex answer. Okay, especially with me. If you're asking me why your relationships are going a certain way in a certain pattern, right? Literally, we're going to talk about your parents. We're going to talk about the ways in which you've been instructed and understand love. Most likely, you're going to have something going on in your seventh house and/or your dark houses that are connecting, and then Chiron's going to be a part of it, right? It's an answer that requires a digging in, right? And so I always tell it to people, when you're working with somebody who is opening up your astrology chart, I do consider that you're overdue. All right. If you're coming to me with a question for your astrology chart, this is an oracle. So I'm going into the oracle. I'm going in and opening up your overdue. This is why I always say, any astrologer, what their weight will say, the astrology chart is alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's like overdue. Overdue is alive, and overdue is also feminine. Overdue is feminine because it's creation. It's a seed of creation. So when I'm looking at your chart, right? We are opening up and you're asking a question. Well, when you ask a question of an oracle, it's going to give you the motherfucking answer. Okay. So I want you to think about that when you're also working with your chart, because you can do that for yourself. As you are going through things and as you are engaging with your chart, get curious with it. When you ask a question of it and you open it up, whether it be that natal, whether it be an horary, whether it be a transit, a solar, whatever chart you're throwing, okay? Whatever chart you're throwing, take seriously the question and then take seriously the answer. So go a little bit deeper. This is why the archetypes need to be messed with a little bit. Because if I read your chart with Saturn as the patriarch, it's going to be a very different story with these transits than if I read it as the crone who is asking you to grow. And why wouldn't the chart ask you to grow? Because it's a living being that is helping you figure out and navigate what this thing called life is. So I just want to say that, y'all. So if you want to get a taste, a little amouche bouche, little moosh boosh. I'll be at Babes, all right? You can do 20 minutes, $30. And those are fun for me. Those are fun because it's on the spot. We have a conversation and we do it. Then I'll be back at Babes at the end of the month on the 25th for a Queering the Astrology of 2026 conversation. You can get tickets for that online. I've already got actually a few tickets sold for that, and that is limited seating. So I would recommend getting tickets for that if you are in Chicago sooner than later, because once tickets are gone, there will be a few at the door, but we are limited by capacity. Okay. But that'll be a fun time as well. So those two things. And the last thing I'll say is I talk about deconstruction a lot here for a reason. We are in a time of deconstruction. This is what it means to tell new stories. You have to break from the ways in which you have been taught to construct the story. So in the Patreon, we're breaking this down more this year. Divination study is going to be tomorrow. I'll send out the calendar invites for folks at the soundscape level and higher. Later this week, there's going to be a conversation for landscape and higher. We're going to start doing more salon conversations in the Patreon, focusing on different topics. So we're going to talk about what does it mean to care for our bodies by working with the change. So ideas around folks who have wombs and menopause. So I'll have more information about that in the Patreon. Okay. But then also I'll be teaching 2 online seminars with through Big Liz Conjure this month. The first is called Deconstruction in Hoodoo. I'm going to break down the ways in which we understand ideas of relationship, time, and connection to land, and how we have to deconstruct from that in order to really be able to access and tap into the energies of what we would call hoodoo in the African American tradition. So that's on the 19th of this month. You can see more information about that in the show notes. And then later this month on the 24th, I'll be back online teaching astrology and hoodoo course as well. All right. So that's it, y'all. I went a little bit longer than I wanted. Oh, thanks, Shay. I appreciate it. Shay said my work is good. I appreciate it. All right. So you can work with me one-on-one. Go ahead and check out my website, drnicolerouse.com. I will be I'll have more stuff up about that. I'll talk about that next week because I'm already running over. All right, y'all. So keep dreaming, keep exploring, all right? Because it's through the dreamscape so we can bring our realities, the futures we want into the present, all right? Till next time. Also, if you watch the Super Bowl, y'all, I want to talk about it next week. So if you're in the Patreon, I want to talk about it this week, but next week, if you come back, let's talk about your reactions to that Super Bowl halftime show, because I want to use that as a way to jump off of how we can then think about what does it mean to tell new stories by retelling them, by constructing new structures. All right. So we're going to world build on the show as well. Till next time. One hand to heaven, the other pointed straight to hell. Right hand as strong as the left, dancing in the shadows with myself and the dead. The shadows on the walls, a mirror to the self. Why stay stagnant and allow the flames to consume you? Dance with them and conjure under the new moon. One hand to heaven, the other a guide to the other side where the dead reside. You gotta use both hands and feel your feet if you wanna defeat the demon masquerading as human.
Wandering, scratch that wandering, trying to find a meaning to it all. Morning's coming, but I ain't running. I'm just dancing with the shadows on the wall. To get to heaven, I went through hell, and now I see it all for what it is. Battling demons to fight for freedom, but surrender is the only way to win. Shadow dancing, playing with the light in the dark. Shadow dancing, playing with the light in the dark.
Justice for the dead, life for the living. What is key is we need to sing a song of freedom from tyranny. One hand to heaven, the other conjuring the dead, who know the songs and actions of freedom that are needed for us in the times ahead.
Fear and rage, define the age, and everybody's hiding from the truth. Stuck together for all alone, and haunted by the shadows in the room. But that's tomorrow's and yesterdays, racing to leave something behind. The end is really the beginning, when you're dancing on the edges of time. The shadow dancing, playing with the light in the dark. The shadow dancing, playing with the light in the dark. The shadow dancing, playing with the light in the dark. The shadow dancing, playing with the light in the dark.
One hand to heaven, the other in the underworld. Under the wood, the trunk of a tree, strong, sturdy, weather-bearing. Offerings laid, prayers are made. Now for the summoning. Dance with the shadows, songs erupting as the lips and hips move to the drumming. One hand to heaven, the other on the other side. Justice for the living requires justice for those on the other side.
The shadow dancing, playing
other pointed straight to hell. Right hand as strong as the left. Dancing in the shadows with myself and the dead. The shadows on the walls, a mirror to the self. Why stay stagnant and allow the flames to consume you? Dance with them and conjure under the new moon. One hand to heaven, the other a guide to the other side where our dead reside. Hear the ancestors call out. You gotta use both hands and feel your feet if you wanna defeat the demons masquerading as humans. Cause we've been here before. Time a loop of remembering and forgetting to remember once again. Of times before those shadows of former selves. One hand to heaven, the other to the past. That brought a present, a shell of the self. One hand to heaven, call down your head and dance in the light of self-knowing. The other hand extends down to the land, a remembrance, a signal to awaken the dead and rise up in glory. Hallelujah! Say their names and watch the shadows dance among the flames. Righteous justice, Libra, fully balanced.